This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debi Silber.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debi Silber, the Dream Coach. This is the show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. We speak a lot on this program about the ways we hold ourselves back from achieving our dream lives. But did you ever consider that maybe you're not getting what you want because of that love of your life who cheated on you 5 years ago? Or maybe that former best friend who posted your deepest dark secrets on social media? Or maybe it was that coworker who sabotaged your plans for the promotion you felt you richly deserved. Well, there's a name for this, Post Betrayal Syndrome, and it can have devastating impacts on your health, your work, and your relationships. We're going to discuss what this is and what you can do about it with my guest, transformational psychologist, Dr. Debi Silber. She's an award-winning speaker who helps people move past their betrayals, and she's the author of several books, including her latest one, Trust Again, Overcoming Betrayal and Regaining Health, Confidence, and Happiness. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Dr. Debi.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too. Debi, we've always taught to believe that time heals all wounds, but your studies show that that's not true. So how does betrayal keep us stuck?
You know, it's one of those things. It's interesting because there are so many different types of trauma: death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, devastation of some kind. And betrayal is a very unique type of trauma. And I just to back up, I did a study of, first of all, you don't study something like betrayal unless you have to. So I had my own betrayals, launched me into this PhD program in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was changing it so much I didn't quite understand it. Anyway, I was there. I did a study on betrayal, what holds us back, what helps us heal, and what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive. That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed everything. But to answer your question, one of the discoveries was there's actually this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal, it's known as post-betrayal syndrome. We've had easily over 25,000 people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. And to answer your question, we've all heard time heals all wounds, and I have the proof that's not the case because there's a question that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? People write things like, my betrayal happened 40 years ago, and I can still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust again. My betrayal happened 10 years ago, feels like it happened yesterday. So we know when it comes to betrayal, we need a very specific protocol.
Okay, so you said that there are symptoms that are define this. So what are those symptoms?
Yeah. So every few months I pull the stats just to see where people land. So we've had every age represented, almost every country represented. So pulled the latest stats for you. Ready? 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. 94% deal with painful triggers. And those triggers can take you down. These are the most common physical symptoms. 71% have low energy. 68% struggle with their sleep. 63% have extreme fatigue. That's your adrenals. Those are your adrenals crashing. 47% have weight changes. So in the beginning, maybe you can't hold food down. Later on, you're using food for comfort. 45% have digestive issues. That's anything from Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, you name it. These are the most common mental symptoms. 78% are overwhelmed. 70% walking around in a state of disbelief. 68% are unable to focus. 64% are in shock. 62% are unable to concentrate. So now just imagine you can't concentrate. You have a gut issue. You're exhausted. and you're still supposed to raise your kids and do your work and show up, right? That's not even the emotional ones. 88% have extreme sadness and 83% are very angry. Now, if you've been angry and sad and you mix those together, that's exhausting right there. 82% feel hurt, 80% have anxiety, 79% are stressed. Here's why I wrote the book, Trust Again. Ready? 84% have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, just reading that list, it exhausts me just hearing about it all.
Staggering, right?
It is. And interesting, you said that your own betrayal caused you to get into this line of work and line of study. So what happened to you?
Yeah. So, nobody says, hey, I think betrayal is a good topic to study, So it's actually my 30th year in business. And as life would morph and change, so would business. So I started in health and then mindset and then personal development and testing people for stress-related symptoms and disorders. And then I had my own trauma. So first it was the betrayal of my family. And I thought I did the work to heal. But then a couple of years later, it happened again. And this time it was my husband. Anybody who's been through it, you're shocked, you're blindsided, you're devastated. Life as you've known it, has just come to a crashing halt. So I got him out of the house and I looked at those two experiences and I said, okay, well, what's similar to these two besides me? But I realized, my boundaries were always getting crossed. I never took my own needs seriously. I was last on my list, which so many people do, right? And I see this with women in particular. So I was like, you know what? That's it. And it was, I don't even know what came over me, but I was like, this is going to be the most drastic, bold move I could ever do. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business. I was 50 and I'm like, we're going back for that PhD. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it, how I was going to manage the time, but I intuitively knew, nothing changes if nothing changes. And it was in that drastic move, everything changed. And, we can spot an unhealed betrayal from a mile away in health, in work, in relationships. And one of the classic ways I see it in relationships, I see it in one of 2 ways. The first way is repeat betrayals. If you have a repeat betrayal, it's an unhealed betrayal. You keep getting, it's like the faces change, but it's the same thing. There is it's not that it's your fault, but there's an opportunity. There's this profound lesson that is waiting to be learned. Until and unless you do, you will keep getting opportunities in the form of people to teach you this. And when you finally get it, that you are lovable, worthy, deserving, you need better boundaries in place, whatever it is for you, lesson learned. You don't have to repeat it again. Or of course, we see the big wall goes up and they're like, nope, been there, done that. No one's getting near me again. And we think it's coming from a place of strength. It's not. It's coming from fear. So many ways. An unhealed betrayal just follows us around until we face it, feel it, heal it.
Yeah. In your studies, do you find that this affects women more than men, or is it everybody?
It's everybody. I'd say we have more women taking the quiz and in the PBT, Post Betrayal Transformation Institute. It's not that we don't have men. I think men are so conditioned just to kind of suck it up and get over it. And they're not as likely to reach out, but we definitely have men and they are just as hurt as the women for sure.
I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about people I know, maybe even looking at myself, if I want to be that clear about it, who've suffered betrayals. And a lot of times I found that people sort of wear it like a badge on their sleeve, like, they'll bring it up a lot or they'll talk about it and almost like they can't let it go. Why is it so hard to let it go?
Yeah, that's actually part of the second discovery. And this was that while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many of us do, if we're going to fully heal, we're going to move through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even better about that is we now know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Tragically, most people out of the 5 stages move to stage 3 and stay there. And the demographic you're speaking about is locked in that stage 3. I mean, I'm happy to go through the stages if that would if that would help.
Now that you've brought it up, when people talk about, okay, 5 stages, okay, my first question is, okay, what are the 5 stages? So
yeah. I mean, when this was discovered, in like the geekiest way, I thought my head was going to fly right off my body. I mean, this was so exciting because now there's a roadmap. If someone is willingness is the key word right here. If someone is willing to do what it takes, they will predictably move from one stage to the next. So now truly staying stuck is a choice. Anyway, so the 5 stages, that's what we teach within the Institute. It's all mapped out in Trust Again, but I'll give you the distilled version. Ready? The first stage is like a setup stage. And I saw this with every study participant, me too. If you imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody was this real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, and kind of neglecting and ignoring the emotional and the spiritual. So what does that look like? Looks like we're really good at thinking and doing, and not really prioritizing the feeling and being. Anyway, if you only have 2 legs of a table, easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage 2, by far the scariest of all of the stages. And this is shock, D-Day, Discovery Day. And this is like where the person takes a mask off and says, this is who I've been this whole time. It's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. You've just ignited the stress response. You are headed now for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete and total state of chaos and overwhelm. This makes no sense. You can't even understand what you just learned. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model. It's the rules that you have. It's what prevents chaos. Don't go there. Trust this person. This is how life works, And in a moment, it's all totally shattered. The bottom is bottomed out on you. And a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So it's terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything and everything you could to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Who can I trust? Where do I go? How do I feed my kids? Here's the trap, though. Once we've figured out how to survive, we're like, okay, all right, I got this. And because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where we just came from, we think it's good. So we start planting roots here because we have no idea there's a stage 4 or stage 5. We think this is the end of the road. So 4 things happen. The first thing is you start getting those small self benefits. You get to be right. You get your story. You get someone to blame. You get sympathy from everybody. Like just that person you were talking about, that's that person right there. And because you're getting that and you don't know you're not supposed to be there long, you plant deeper roots. Now, because you're there longer than you should, your mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe you deserved it, right? Deeper roots. And now because that's the energy you're sending out, that's what you think, like energy attracts like energy. So now you have situations and circumstances and relationships coming towards you to confirm, yep, this is exactly where you belong. So you plant deeper roots. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but you have no idea there's anything better. Right here is where you resign yourself. You're like, this stinks, but I better figure out a way to manage this. So right here is where you start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, anything to numb, avoid, distract yourself from what's so painful to feel or face. So think about it. You do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see these are the people that you know, by the way. And so I can see someone 20 years out and say, that emotional eating you're doing, or that numbing in front of the TV you're doing, or that, drinking you're doing, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And honestly, they would look at me like I'm crazy. And they would say, that happened 20 years ago. Doesn't matter. You see, all they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stayed there. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. And I tell you, with that, we need to take a little short break now. So we're talking all about betrayal with Dr. Debi Silber, and we'll be right back. What do Thomas Jefferson, Elias Howe, and Paul McCartney have in common? They all understood the value of dreams, and as a result, the ideas, inventions, and creations from their dreams affect us to this day. What great ideas are you leaving on your pillow at night? Sign up for a complimentary consultation at my website, thedreamcoach.net. and discover why your dreams are a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debi Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debi Spector-Weissman, and we're speaking about the devastating effects of betrayal with Dr. Debi Silber. Well, Debi, you were talking about the stages, and we got stuck on stage 3. So what happens with stage 4 and 5?
Yeah. So stage 3, that is that stage we can get stuck in if we're not careful for life. Anyway, if we're willing to give up all of those benefits we were getting, grieve, mourn the loss, a few things we need to do, we can move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where you acknowledge and you accept, I can undo my betrayal, but I can control what I do with it. And I always use the example of if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff isn't all there yet. It's not quite cozy yet, but you know it's going to be okay. When you're in this mental space, you start turning down the stress response. So you're not physically healing just yet, but at least you stopped the massive damage you were causing in stages 2 and stage 3. And what's so interesting about stage 4 also is if you were to move, you don't take everything with you. You don't take the things that don't represent who you want to be when you're in that new space. And what I found was if your friends weren't there for you, or that misery loves company crowd you picked up in stage 3, you don't take them with you to stage 4. You've just outgrown them. And people say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation and you've just outgrown them. If they can't rise up, they're gone. When you're in this space, you're making it cozy. You're making it mentally, okay. You move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercising, things like that. You didn't have the bandwidth for any of that earlier. Now you do. Your mind is healing. You're making new rules, new boundaries based on the road you just traveled. And you have a new worldview based on what you see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was just the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
That is an amazing discovery. Tell me this. So somebody's living their life and maybe they had a betrayal a while ago and they're in this stage 3 and they're stuck and they're living their life and they know something's maybe not right, but are not sure it is. How do they know that they're actually suffering from post betrayal syndrome?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if they have any of the symptoms that I mentioned, there you go. If they're numbing, avoiding, distracting, that's another way you know. If there's that sense of unease, if they don't feel good, see what happens is, and if you want me to explain the 3rd discovery, you'll see. Because when you're in a place of post-betrayal transformation, you're not stuck in stage 3. That was the 3rd discovery. I felt like healing from betrayal is different than healing from other life crises, death of a loved one, disease. I had been through both of those. And I was like, betrayal feels different for me, but I didn't want to assume. So I asked all my study participants and I said, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Every single person in the study said, oh my gosh, it's so different. And here's why. Because it feels so intentional, you take it so personally. So the whole self is shattered and has to be rebuilt. Think about it. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, shattered. So it didn't feel the same as post-traumatic growth, which is sort of the upside of trauma, how trauma can leave you, any trauma can leave you with a new insight, awareness, perspective. Yes, that can happen with betrayal, but you also have to completely rebuild the self. So I coined a new term, which is now called post-betrayal transformation. So when you heal after your experience and you completely rebuild the self, you are a very different person. So when you're in that state, you're not in stage 3 anymore. It's a completely different identity. You take the parts you love, you leave behind everything that doesn't serve. You've recreated yourself.
Are all betrayals equal? And by that, I mean, are the symptoms or the impacts of somebody who gets hurt by a loved one the same as somebody who gets betrayed by a family member or a coworker or somebody else or a situation?
No. The way it works is the more we trust, the more we depend on the person, the deeper the betrayal. So, for example, a child who's completely dependent on their parent and the parent does something awful, that's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your coworker taking credit for your idea. Still a betrayal, but the magnitude is different. And in fact, when I was doing the study, at first, I wanted to study the betrayal of a family member, a partner, and a friend. But I had to drop the friend part because although they infuriate you and make you crazy and you end the friendship, they don't break you. I mean, of course, we're never broken, bent, you know what I mean? They don't break you like how a family member or a partner does. Those are the biggest ones. We could be betrayed by, I remember doing when in the study, learning about when companies betray us. This is interesting. There's something called the love turns to hate or something like that principle where we would rather buy a product we know is bad for us. Like let's say alcohol, right? We would rather knowingly buy a product that's bad for us than be duped into thinking and being told a product is good and it's actually not. That's when we love a product, whoo, does it turn quickly. We don't want to be duped. We don't like it.
I'm sure, no, we don't. This is very true. Before, you mentioned a word that I think is very important and critical to all this, which is trust.
Ooh.
So how does trust fit into this? And what happens? How do we regain trust?
Yeah, trust is shattered in betrayal. And what happens is, of course, we don't trust our betrayer. We don't even trust ourselves. We're like, I'm a bright person. How did I not see? How did I not know? And so certainly it's like, how do we trust anybody else? If the person we trusted the most proved untrustworthy, how do you trust somebody else? So trust is completely and totally shattered. So of course, I map it all out in trust again, but I teach a 4-step trust rebuilding process. And I'm happy to share that. But the way I look at trust is it's really like a brick wall. The only way I know of a brick wall being built is brick by brick by brick, right? Every opportunity someone has to show that they're trustworthy represents one brick in that wall. Brick by brick by brick, right? And then that same person can just completely shatter the entire brick wall, right? So the other person now, the person whose trust has been shattered, can look at the rubble of bricks and say, I don't have the least bit of interest watching that thing get rebuilt, and you walk away. However, if you have any interest in trusting that person again, the person whose trust has been shattered has to be willing to watch the brick wall be rebuilt. And the person who shattered the wall has to be a really good bricklayer and do it the same way they did it the first time, brick by brick by brick. But what I see so often is trust gets shattered. The person whose trust gets shattered feels so upset and it's so uncomfortable and it's such a bad situation. So it's essentially like they say, okay, forget it. I'll just build the brick wall. And that's not their job, you see? So they never feel safe. They never trust because that person who shattered the brick wall didn't have the opportunity to rebuild it. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. But you also mentioned a word now, safe. And it seems to me like you can be safe or feel safe in that stage 3 that you talk about where many people get stuck. Mm-hmm. But it's not the same kind of safe as the safe you feel when you know yourself and you love yourself. So can you talk about that distinction?
Yeah, exactly. The type of safety you're talking about is like safe, stuck, and small. And it's like false safety. It's I'm safe as long as I keep the big wall up. I'm safe as long as I don't see that person. I'm safe as long as we don't talk about them. That's not safe. It's almost like, and here's the thing. You've been through the worst of it already. You owe it to yourself to do something good with something bad. I mean, I didn't do anything that anybody else couldn't do. It's just the injustice was so great for me. Integrity is my highest value. So imagine something like betrayal, like that just doesn't resonate at all. So, I mean, I just said, if I can heal from this, I'm taking everybody with me. That's just the only thing that made sense. But real safety is when you heal from all of it, and rebuilding is always a choice, whether you rebuild yourself and move on. And that's what I did with my family. It wasn't an option to rebuild anything with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something entirely new. I'm talking entirely new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, we married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party. So the safety comes from when you've rebuilt yourself. Everything has been shattered. So it's like personal power, where you're doing something because you want to, not because you feel you need to. It's coming from a place of strength, not fear.
And what happens if one day you wake up and you realize, oh my God, I am the source of betrayal. I was the one who betrayed somebody.
Yeah.
How does that person recover? And
it's an amazing opportunity. How do you heal shame? You bring light and you bring honor to it. And if not, shame is one of the most physically destructive emotions we have. So if you are the betrayer and you're walking around with this shame, it is so destructive. You're not doing anybody or yourself any good, and betrayal is a beautiful opportunity to wake up and realize how you've been behaving, how you've been treating other people, how you've been acting. Like for my husband, he actually was the one who told my kids. And I think if anything is going to wake you up and have you realize what matters, it's realizing you just lost everything that matters. And it is an ultimate wake-up call, right? But when the person who's been betrayed just kind of accepts it and the betrayer just gets away with it, it's such a wasted opportunity for both, But what I see so often is there is such fear about that death and destruction of the old. But because of that, they never have an opportunity to rebirth the new, and there were 3 groups in my study who didn't heal. One of the groups, this was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences, to your point, where, it was just too uncomfortable or out of financial fear, religious reasons. That was a big one, or just fear of the unknown. They were like, okay, whatever. I saw 2 things with this group: further deterioration of the relationship. And the second thing was this group, out of everybody, was the most physically sick. Your broken heart can't take that.
Yeah, it's amazing because we say it's not just the mental anguish; it's the physical effects.
Oh yeah,
it just gets you all throughout your entire body.
There's not a place it doesn't hit physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And that's why when people say, "Okay, I'll just go to therapy," first of all, if that therapist isn't highly skilled in betrayal, it does more harm than good. And that's only the cognitive level. It all has to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. And let's say you undergo betrayal and you do go through all these steps and you have, a healing and a personal rebirth. Mm-hmm. What can prevent you from ever getting betrayed again?
Yeah. You know what? This is what we teach within the Institute. Your BS meter is so sharpened and so strong. You sense that, that type of behavior from a mile away. You are a different person. So you've just outgrown the types of instances that you'd attract had you not done that healing. Listen, anything's possible, but what I've seen so often is the type of person who would naturally betray, you've simply outgrown. You're just playing in a very different sandbox.
Oh, that is so fascinating. And I'd love to go into this so much more, but we are just about out of time. I just have time for one final question, which is how can people find out more about you and your work?
Thank you so much. I really recommend everybody take the Post Betrayal Syndrome quiz to see to what extent they're struggling. They can just find that at the PBT, as in Post Betrayal Transformation, thepbtinstitute.com/quiz.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We've been speaking with transformational psychologist, speaker, and author, Dr. Debi Silber. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If you have, please tell all your friends, drop a positive review on your podcast site, and follow me. And if you're on Clubhouse, join me in my club, Club Dreams, where I host rooms on all aspects of dream work. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debi Spector Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.